Today, we're talking about money. How much money I put into building this shed I'm sitting in right now, and that I've made a bunch of videos about.
My name is Blake Calhoun. I'm a freelance filmmaker and YouTube creator. And during the pandemic, I had a Tuff Shed built in my backyard to use as a home studio. This series of videos shows how I did it and how you can too.
If you haven't seen the series I made about building my Tuff Shed home studio that I have here for YouTube and podcast, be sure to check that out. Links are in the description. Today, what I'm going to go over, and I've meant to make this video for a while. I've been meaning to make this video for a while. I'm gonna go over how much I spent. That's been a common question and I totally get it. But I wanna give you a spoiler right off the top. This wasn't cheap. This wasn't cheap. Now there are some DIY aspects to this project. I saved some money in certain places, but putting this together cost me a decent chunk of change, I'll be the first to admit. However, to put it in context, before I moved home, like a lot of you did, I'm sure, during the pandemic, I was spending about $1,500 a month in rent. And so that money, in my mind, I took to put into a studio shed where I do my work now, and I don't have to pay rent. So in saying all that, I've got all the numbers right here in my iPad, and I will go over these and let you know what I spent. The first part of the project was doing the gravel pad, and that was the most DIY and the most affordable aspect of this entire project. I had to buy plastic edging that was just under $70. I had to buy weed barrier, and that was comes in a large sheet, and that was under $90. I bought rock, and I bought the rock in stages because I didn't know how much I needed. The first batch I bought was 8 bags, and that was $35. And this is fairly cheap rock. I also bought a shovel, and I bought a rake because of the stuff we had at my house wasn't up to snuff. I only spent $16 in the shovel, and I spent $11 on the rake. You may already have that at your house, so you probably don't need to buy that, but I did. I had to buy spikes for the edging to help put the edging into the ground. This was like landscape edging. That was just under $21. I had to buy weed barrier stakes, the fabric stakes. Those were $5.68. Then I had to buy more rock. If you've seen that video, you know that I progressed through it, and the rock that I had wasn't enough. And so I bought 10 more bags. That was $47.41. And then I ended up needing more spikes for the edging. That was just under $7. And then last but not least, I needed more rock. And that was 10 more bags, and it was again $47.41. And so the grand total out-of-pocket money spent on the DIY gravel pad that goes underneath the shed was $350.34. So that's pretty cheap. That's a good deal, and that was truly DIY. That part actually saved me a lot of money. Although Tuff Shed says you don't need to do anything like that if you don't want to. I decided to do it because I didn't want weeds or grass or insects or whatever coming up underneath my shed. So I have that down as a barrier. Once I ordered my shed, I picked up a few things before the shed actually got here. I'm gonna go over those real quick. And these are upgrades to an extent, but they're also things that you kind of need when you're putting together a studio. And the first one is, I bought an upgraded door. The Tuff Shed comes with a standard door. I didn't like it. I was trying to give my shed a little bit better curb appeal. And so the door I bought, it wasn't cheap. It was actually a pretty nice door. It's $733.94. I bought that at Home Depot. Then I had to buy a nice door handle and lock, and I spent $138.26 on that. By the way, that was a quick set, and it was terrible. I ended up returning it. I actually bought 2 of them, and they both fell apart. I ended up going with a Schlage in the end, so just an FYI. I also bought a light for the outside of my shed, a porch light, and this was kind of a cool contemporary looking one. That was $86.49. The other thing I bought that's really unrelated to the construction aspect, so this could be considered finish out or accessories, but I did buy a Husky tool cabinet, and I'm using it as storage, and I did an entire video on that. So check that out if you're interested, but that tool cabinet was $139.64. And so my pre-shed build purchases were a total of $1,098.33. I'm gonna go over the actual shed cost in just a moment, but before I built the shed, I also went ahead and bought my rock landscaping because I had had a plan from the beginning, which I think is a good idea if you're embarking on a project like this. And again, if you hadn't seen these videos, I've done videos on all these different stages during the project. And one of them was the landscaping around the shed, which was really important. And this was also a more affordable DIY aspect of the project. For that, I had to buy spikes for the edging because I had to do a little fix. I used some of the same edging that I did from the original gravel pad part in this part of it. Those were only $7. But then I bought all this stone, this edge stone, which was by Pave Stone. Again, I got this at Home Depot. That I spent $95.92 on. There were 44 of them. And I lined them up around the actual shed to build this little, again, landscaping bed. In the end, I had to get more of that though. I didn't buy enough, which has become a recurring theme on my project here. Had to buy 7 more, so that was $15.26. And then I bought nice rock to put around it, and this was Mexican beach pebble. And I started off with 10 bags, and that was $114.80. This rock is a little bit more expensive, but it's a nicer decorative rock. I had to buy another batch. That was 14 more bags, and so that was $160.72. Then I had to actually buy 3 more bags, and that was $34.44. And then the last piece of that little puzzle where I put a small little paved stone porch in front of the shed once it was built. Again, I bought this stuff prior, although I didn't buy the paved stone prior. I bought the other stuff prior because I knew I was going to use it. The little front porch design kind of changed and evolved along the way. But that I'm including here because it's part of the landscaping in quotes. I bought 6 of those. They're paved stone front step stones, and those were a total of $52.08. And so the rock landscaping bed, I spent $480.19. Again, pretty affordable considering how that looks and I think how it turned out. All right, now the actual shed, and then I'll go over the finish out of the shed. But the shed itself is a 10x16 lean-to. It's also called a Premier Pro. The lean-to is the Home Depot name. The Premier Pro is the Tuff Shed name. Tuff Shed works through Home Depot, or you can go directly to Tuff Shed. I found going through Home Depot, you get a better deal, so you save a little bit of money. So the base price of the 10x16 lean-to was $36.60, $3,660. That sounds pretty reasonable. That's not bad. Well, I did a bunch of upgrades because I'm using my shed as a home office. And so not just as a shed to store a lawnmower in, obviously. I'm sitting in the shed right now. And so the upgrade total was $31.88. And the upgrades included the radiant barrier, which is in the roof and helps with AC and heating. I did a thicker treated floor. It was a 3/4 inch treated floor. That was $160. The radiant barrier roof was $168. And then I did a house wrap around the inside of the shed because again, I got insulation and sheetrock, traditional walls put in here. So the house wrap was $359. And then I got 2 sliding windows with screens on either side of the shed, and they slide up and down instead of sideways. Those cost a little bit more. And the reason I did that is I have an AC unit put in here. And so I needed this type of window to put that AC unit in. I also got a larger roof put on the shed. And so it has an 18-inch eave over the front, which is pretty cool. It looks good. And it also helps block rain from hitting the front. And then on the edges, I got a 12-inch overhang on the back and sides. That adds cost to the overall price of the shed. My shed also had to have a stick build. They call it a stick build because often they will build the majority of it at their warehouse and just drive it out here on a truck. But with mine, because we had a big fence on my property, they had to build it on my property instead of building it mainly there. So they mainly built it here. I don't remember exactly how much that was, but it was an additional charge. And then I also got these transom windows above my door, which I really like. I think it really adds a nice contemporary vibe to the shed. That cost extra too. Everything I just mentioned, including the shed, the total for the base price and the upgrades was $6,848.60. So if you were just getting a price for a shed, that's what you should budget, around $7,000 for this size shed. And so now the finish out really takes this price up. It's not expensive in the scheme of things, but for you guys doing a DIY project, and by the way, if you are a DIY home improvement person who can do your own drywall, insulation, electricity, you won't have these expenses, but I am not. I'm a filmmaker who got this shed built because I wanted to do a home studio. There's parts of this that are DIY and parts of it that I hired out. And so the finish out as it relates to the construction, and this is the stuff I bought to be put in the shed, I had to buy lights Dimmable LED, I have 3 in the ceiling. That was $53.91. I bought an LED dimmer switch. That was $27.86. Had to buy a switch plate for the wall. That was $7.97. Various plug covers and electrical brackets. I spent just under $14. I bought some exterior touch-up paint because the paint that they used to paint the shed, which was included in the construction, by the way, that price from Tuff Shed. But I bought touch-up paint and I spent $51 on that. And then I bought flooring, laminate flooring, and it took 8 boxes to cover this square footage, 160 square feet. Very affordable flooring. That was only $186.02. And then I bought underlayment for the laminate flooring. That was $108.21. And then the interior paint and the trim out, the trim around the floor and the doors and the windowsills, etc. I spent approximately $200 on that. So again, it's a fairly small space, so it didn't cost me a lot. And so the price for this stuff was $540.37. So $540.37, but then, and this is where it gets expensive, I had to pay for the labor, of course, the finish out labor. And so the labor on the construction, which did, by the way, include all the insulation and the sheetrock, it was $3,285, $32.85. And then the finish out for the electrical, which they came twice. They came at the beginning when the shed was just built, and they ran all the different Romex, etc. Then they came back once the shed was actually constructed and the finish out was done to finish their part of the job, to tie it all together and make sure it all works. And so the electrical labor was $1,050. And so the total for the labor to do the finish out was $4,335. And so the total then for the actual finish out, the labor plus the parts, so to speak, I bought, the accessories, was $4,875.37. And speaking of accessories, I have even more that I bought for my particular shed. Again, I'm using this as a studio shed for YouTube videos, for podcasting, etc. And so I had some additional expenses that I want to include here, and especially because I did solar in the shed. A lot of people don't do that. But the first thing I bought from a finish out and that I actually installed is I bought blackout roller shades for the windows, for the 2 windows. That was $207.84. They're custom. I bought them from Home Depot. That's not too bad though. And then I bought a tall storage cabinet, kind of the utility closet in the shed that's back in the corner. I bought that from Home Depot as well. It's $149.02, and I put that together. That was a little bit of a pain, but I did put that together. I bought a window unit, and that was $400 with the installation. The installation was pretty simple. I could have done it myself, but I had a guy I bought it from Lowe's. I had a guy from Lowe's come out just to make sure it was done right. And then I bought a solar power station. And so some people call those solar generators, and it is an AC200 from Bluetti. And at the time, I bought it back in, I think that may have been summer 2020. I bought that a while ago because it was during an Indiegogo campaign. I didn't get delivered until I think almost 2021, but I got a really good deal on it. It was $1,199. Right now, that same generator, although it's been updated a little bit, but the same generator is about $1,600. So I saved $500 doing it through Indiegogo. And then I bought a second power station, its little brother, and I showed this in the solar video I did about putting this stuff together. And that's the AC50. It's also a Bluetti, and that was $350. Again, this is stuff you may or may not need, but in a shed, it's kind of cool to have these extra power sources or power supplies. And then the last larger expense related to all this, I bought 3 flexible solar panels from Renogy, and they're 175 watt, and they're the type that go on an RV typically, but I put them on the shed roof, and that with cables was roughly $600. They may be a little bit more expensive now, because again, I bought those a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half, not quite a year and a half, but a little over a year ago. And that's a good point I should bring up. Everything I'm talking about, I bought probably a year plus ago, in some cases more than that. And with inflation and depending on where you live, these prices are probably higher today. I'm recording this in June of 2022. So those are all the costs, and the total cost for everything all in the way I did it, a drum roll please. And this actually kind of surprised me. I didn't realize I spent quite this much money. The total was $16,558.69. So almost 17 grand. So that's pretty pricey. As I said at the beginning, this isn't cheap. Some components of this were affordable and more DIY than other, But the way I look at it, number one, I wanted it. And number two, I'm not paying my $1,500 a month in office rent anymore. I'm saving that money each month, although I put it into the shed technically, but I've had this going on for a year plus, I think, working in the actual shed. So it's almost paid for itself by this point. But again, if you didn't want to do all the extras, if you're just doing the gravel pad, the shed, and if you did want to do the finish out, you're looking at about 12,000 bucks. I figured $12,074.31. And then if you didn't want to do the finish out, you could take, $5,000 off that. So again, you're looking at about $7,000 for this size shed with these type of amenities, with the extra radiant barrier, the floor, etc. And so there you go. That's what I put into this shed. And the whole process took about 6 months, truth be told. But I started it back at the end of 2020, fall 2020, during the main part of the pandemic, and it carried into the first quarter or so of 2021. And again, now it's 2022. And the good news is everything is held up extremely well. The solar panels work great. The AC still works very well. Nothing has really hindered my use in the shed at all. Again, if you haven't seen the videos I produced about this shed, they're all on this channel, and I will put links to them in the description of this video. But that's it. I hope you learned something, and I hope you didn't get too much sticker shock. Thanks for watching. This is Blake Calhoun, and I will see you in the next video.